The psychedelic revolution is here. If you want to integrate your visionary experiences into your purpose, get clear on your entrepreneurial path, and help people while you do what you love, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Psychedelic Entrepreneur, medicine for these times. I'm your host, Beth Weinstein. I'm a spiritual business coach, 3-time entrepreneur, and a lifelong student of psychedelics and sacred plant medicines. You carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times. This podcast will help you to share your medicine so you can create transformation in the world. Listen in on conversations with psychedelic leaders, changemakers, and conscious entrepreneurs who are living proof that a better world is possible when you follow your heart and live in alignment with your soul. Welcome back, everyone. I am so honored to have Tobey here with us, coming into us live from Colorado. Hi, Tobey. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for hosting.
So, Tobey, we have all these common friends in the kind of psychedelic space. My friend Daniel had recommended you to interview as a guest and had been the first person to tell me about the work you're doing around integration. So I can't wait to get into it. So I'll just tell you a little bit. Tobey is a transpersonal therapist and integration coach. He received an MA in clinical mental health counseling with a concentration in mindfulness-based transpersonal counseling from Naropa University. He has over 8 years of experience in harm reduction, offering on-site peer support and drug education with the Zendo Project, Nest, Dance Safe, Harmonia, and is the 4-year past president of the Psychedelic Club of Denver. Tobey believes in the power of a community container and enjoys facilitating support groups. He has conducted over 100 psychedelic peer integration circles, and his therapy internship focused on equine-assisted therapy sessions and groups. As a transpersonal therapist, he is fascinated by the experiences in life that bring us outside of the mundane. Amazing. I love it. I can't wait to get into it because you offer just, such a range, and you've really been entrenched in this world for a while, especially, there in one of the epicenters in the U.S. in Colorado. But Tobey, I always love to know, what is your personal story of how you got onto this path of becoming a therapist and integration coach, getting involved in the psychedelic space? And I always love to know, did you used to have some other totally unrelated career at one point before all this?
Yeah. I guess pre-psychedelics, I was working as a technical support specialist at Boeing Aviation, helping people with navigation problems on aircrafts, both like small as all the way up to like commercial aviation. So I was doing that for a while, kind of even while I was starting to move into the psychedelic world. And I think that really moving away from that was a result of psychedelics. I'm like, wow, I hate this. Yeah, so I think like I dabbled in psychedelics at the start of like my 20s, and then came across harm reduction like as a concept. I had some friends who were doing volunteer work with an organization called Dance Safe that does like drug education and drug checking in the nightlife sector, and I kind of came across that as I was discovering psychedelics and becoming curious. And I think I was really lucky that some of my friends at the time were really educated and really cared about harm reduction. So I think that was kind of like a fateful twist to be in network and in connection with people who were knowledgeable, who would even tell me that I should be testing substances, that I should be not just taking random things from strangers. So I think that was really profound. And then did a little bit of volunteer work with Dance Safe, and then came across the Zendo Project, I want to say in like 2015. And the Zendo Project offers psychedelic, I just call it psychedelic first aid at music festivals and Burning Man. And I came across them at a festival in California, Lightning in a Bottle, in 2015. And actually, I feel like my journey really started by having a challenging psychedelic experience. I was at this festival, I had a really challenging psychedelic experience, and ended up being a guest at the Zendo Project. And just like having that firsthand experience, I think is huge, of like being in a really I don't know, difficult space, and just like having that kind of flip upside down. Someone from the Zendo came over after like, I don't know, was having, I guess I call it a meltdown or a really tough experience. And they're like, it's okay, I'm here with you. And just like had this experience where my world flipped upside down. Instead of being in like a space of terror and fear, I was like in a space of safety and containment. And then, I don't know, I spent my whole night at the Zendo project talking with this wonderful woman, and then came back in the morning. I'm like, wow, what happened? Learned more about like how to get involved with the Zendo project. And then from there, the next year came back to the same festival and was working as a volunteer. And then since then, I've been working in psychedelic harm reduction spaces all over the world. I've done psychedelic harm reduction in Costa Rica at Envision Festival. I've worked at a festival in Canada. So really, I think like, at least for me, the nexus point was like just having that difficult experience, having space held for me, and then, I don't know, just seeing the value of that firsthand, of having somebody who's trained in de-escalation, who's trained in empathy, to really like be there, to be present. And I think that that's, at least for me, really resonates with my soul. Like just being able to be that calm, grounded, compassionate place is really kind of taken everything from there.
Oh, so beautiful. I love it that you actually went into Zendo as someone in need of Zendo, which I did the Zendo training back in 2017 at Burning Man, actually. And I was like, wow, I kind of want to know what it's like to be someone that has to go in. And had I known about it pre-2017, I probably would have gone in at some point. So that's beautiful. Thank you so much for doing all that volunteer work. And especially, this harm reduction realm is so important because, of course, back in my early 20s and teens even, I did things that people gave me that I didn't test and I didn't know what they were, and they weren't what they said they were, which is still happening. Of course, that hasn't stopped even with today's world that we're in. But let's talk about then I'm curious how you made this shift into therapy. This is a lot of clients that I get, a lot of people that I know in this realm are feeling called to this path of service, but maybe they have a corporate career at a Boeing type company. Were you just like, this is my calling, I know I'm here to help people? And what did it take to just start on that path?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm lucky that throughout like my years of being a volunteer at the Zendo project, that I've made some really good friends and connections. So I think a couple of the people that like helped start and run the Zendo project really inspired me to kind of pursue that path. Like, I think starting off by like just holding space for people, I'm like, wow, this really like resonates with my soul. I really like this. Like, how do I make this into a career? And I don't know that harm reduction, unfortunately, is a viable career path. Even 8 years into volunteering, doing some paid gigs, I don't know that like that's ever gonna pay all my bills, unfortunately. As important as it is, I don't think that like there's like a mismatch for promoters and people like that wanting to pay for those services versus like making that a full-time career. So really feeling, I think, inspired by Sarah Gale, the founder of the Zendo project. She went to Naropa, and my mentor, Erica Seagal, she runs Nest Harm Reduction. I think those two really were like a big inspiration for me, where I'm like, wow, okay, so how do I do this more? How do I do more of this? Like, I love this. How do I do more of this? And I think, at least for me, at a certain point, the answer was that I want to get a master's degree, which is like something that's really surprising for me. Like, I'm not classically a great student. Like, it took me 7 years to get through my undergrad. Like, and then somehow finding myself in a master's program and like doing really well at a master's program, I think like really was like just finding my passion and chasing it and seeing how far I could chase it really like is what I think led me to Naropa, to this therapy path, to hopefully someday be doing psychedelic therapy. I still feel like there's a lot of that path for me before I'm like going to be actually doing the thing that I'm passionate about.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. And, I love that you really just found this passion, asked, how can I get paid to do this? That's actually kind of similar to my own path, where I didn't know there was even such a thing as a coach. I was just helping people. And then people said, you should do this for a career. And so I do talk to my clients a lot about that. Like, where is that place in your heart that's just pulling you, and get curious, start to explore it. But let's go into, what you then did, and also how psychedelic experiences since that one in the Zendo project back in 2015, how did they play a part in your, path to becoming a therapist and your path ever since? You were still doing harm reduction, but were you going into the psychedelic space on a fairly regular basis and having insights and guidance? Like, did the psychedelic path inform this path of like, I want to help people, even if it's in a non-psychedelic space, like therapy? Did the psychedelic experiences guide you in some way?
Yeah, I think that like, at least for me, it's always kind of been a way, I don't know, I've always wanted to like chase whatever feels resonant for me. So I think that like after I started volunteering with the Zendo Project, I remember the first event that I was working with them, I had a psychedelic experience that was really powerful, where I felt like this, I don't know, sense of connection and purpose, where I'm like, wow, this work is really amazing. And I think that like I've had that experience a couple times where I just feel like just such alignment in like a psychedelic space with like the work, with like being that person who can help people on sometimes like the toughest night of their life. I think that that really feels resonant to me. And then I think that that feels similar to like the therapy path for me. Just like, how can I help people going through like some real heavy shit? Like, how can we like be together, two people in a room, and how can I like offer you some help on your path? So I think for me, I don't know, for me, like the more I get into psychedelics, the less psychedelics I take, which I think is really ironic. For me, I think a lot of like the psychedelic takeaway is actually like the power of community. So the first year that I was volunteering with the Zendo Project, a friend of mine who works for Dance Safe, she connected me with some people in Denver who were trying to start a psychedelic club. So me and a couple people pretty soon after that first time that I was working with Zendo Project started the Psychedelic Club of Denver. And we ended up growing from like, I want to say there were 7 of us meeting in the back of a dive bar in July of 2016, all the way to starting a decriminalization campaign in 2019. So like, I think like for me, at least, one of the real takeaways from psychedelics is just like the power of community, the power of like finding people who are like-minded. I think like for me, that's a huge part of the psychedelic experience, is just like being in connection and community with like people who are also passionate or curious about psychedelics has been like a huge part of my journey.
Thanks for sharing. And I agree. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because that's something I've talked about on this podcast a lot with people around this idea of relational healing and healing in community. And of course, this is a part of this like pandemic in our world right now, where so many people feel disconnected and isolated and lonely, even though we're technically more connected than ever. And, really turning to psychedelics to find this within them, when it's actually like, it's not just the psychedelic. It's like we can actually create this in our day to day. But I want to hear a little bit first about becoming also an integration coach. There's a lot of listeners who really want to go on this path. Maybe they've been on the psychedelic path for a long time and they're ready to be of service, but maybe they don't have a master's in therapy, or maybe they actually haven't studied anything in particular. These integration coach training programs have only been out a few years now. But what do you say to someone, who wants to start up, let's say, an integration business or be of service in this way? Do you have any tips? And also, what are the realities? Like I used to say, a lot of people who work with psychedelics don't think they even need integration, or they don't even know that word. At least a few years ago, they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I love that there's like this continuing discussion on the importance of integration. I think that that's huge, because I think integration is really where the magic happens. And I don't know, I just kind of, I guess, want to say that I stumbled into this kind of work. Like I originally was working with therapists for the Psychedelic Club of Denver who were like running our integration circles. And I was just more of like a community organizer kind of side of the things. And then I want to say 2 different times, our group of therapists, this is back in like 2016 when it was much less acceptable, was like, wow, I don't think I can keep running this because I'm worried about liability for my license. So like this happened not once, but twice. I think we probably went through, I want to say 3 different therapists. And so for me, at least, like I spent a lot of time watching other people run this space before I ever stepped into like running in an integration circle. And then after a while, I'm like, wow, this is a really important offering. Like offering people a place to process, I think is huge. And yeah, so I guess, I don't know, like that my experience is necessarily the way that everyone else should. I think there's like 2 different aspects to like the integration. I think there's like this one-on-one integration, which I think is more of like the classic integration coaching. And then I think that there's like peer integration coaching, which is kind of where my organization Altered States does a lot of our work, is in like an integration circle where, at least in that seat, I don't think that you have to be a therapist. I don't think you have to be a coach. Like it's peer integration circles. So I think that like, as long as you're passionate about psychedelics, I think that that's a great place to start your journey. And I don't know. I think that for me, at least for people who want to like move into like peer integration coaching, I'd recommend people to attend a lot of different integration circles. Like everyone has kind of a different style. Like the style that we run our integration circles is a little bit different than like Daniel from TAM Integration, and is different than like a lot of like the psychedelic clubs integration circles. So I guess people that are passionate about peer integration should attend a lot of integration circles, see how it's done, see what they like, see what they don't like. I think that at least for like the group integration circles, I think there's lots of places to get these skills. I think that like therapy skills are interpersonal skills. So I think like those help, like practicing reflective listening, practicing paraphrasing, stuff like that. But I think that there's also other places to get these much cheaper than going through a master's program. I don't know that like I would recommend that to anyone after my own experiences of going through a master's program. So I think that like finding people that you resonate with that are doing the work in the space. I think a lot of people in this space are moving towards having trainings. I know that Daniel's about to launch a year-long integration coach program. We have an 8-week program called Start to Finish Integration Circle that really focuses on peer integration, like the style that we're doing, and then offers our students an opportunity to co-lead one of our integration circles. And I think there's also lots of really great coaching programs out there that are a great place to start. I can't speak for a lot of them, but I know that Lumia is doing a really great coaching program, not specifically focused on psychedelics, but I think a lot of these skills can carry over to psychedelics. Like, I think coaching's coaching.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that. And also, just for listeners that don't know, what is a peer integration circle versus, like a one led by a head coach or a therapist?
Yeah, so I guess on my approach, I think that being a peer means that I'm walking away from being the person who has the answers. I'm walking away from maybe being therapist Tobey, and I'm coming into the room as passionate about psychedelics therapy Tobey, like that person who's really passionate about psychedelics and wants to hear everyone's stories. So my role in that space, I think, is really about creating this container, like going over guidelines, facilitating conversations, seeing if people are open for reflections, moderating like that as we're going through, making sure that somebody doesn't monopolize all of the time. And then I think, at least in my approach, there's these like harm reduction hat moments where somebody says something outrageous. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know that that's advised. I'm really glad that that worked out for you. And I don't know that I would advise anyone else try that, and really like pointing people towards resources. I think it's really similar to NA or AA, which I think is like probably the most common peer support group that people are probably familiar with. Like, I don't know, you're not an expert. Whoever's like facilitating the meeting is there because they're passionate about creating that space, but they're also not like acting as the expert. Like, they are there to create connection and community.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, it's been interesting being in this world for a few years now. And, you know, many years ago, the word integration kind of, I mean, it existed, of course, but it wasn't really widely discussed. And, you know, I helped some of the early integration coaches build their business. And, you know, years ago, it was like no one was even seeking integration. I'm curious, you know, are people, first of all, are people still, are they going to your integration circles? And then have you seen an increase? Like, is it really true that people want and seek integration support, especially as obviously psychedelics are growing rapidly all over the place? I mean, are you seeing an increase, and have you seen this trend that's just ticking upward, you know, month after month?
Yeah, I don't know that I would say it's like a month after month, like exponential growth. I think that we at least had a large growth during the pandemic. Like most of our offerings are virtual. So I think that that was really helpful in terms of like connecting with people. Like we had, God, I want to say she was 92. We had a 92-year-old lady who had tried psychedelics for the first time, had literally downloaded Zoom to attend an integration circle that we were hosting. So stuff like that I think is really cool. Just like having like the option for people to connect has been really cool. And like watching who joins these spaces is really interesting. I'm always like surprised because it seems like lots of people are interested and passionate about psychedelics, people that I would never have guessed. Like people, a lot of like our community comes from Texas. And I'm like, wow, I would never have guessed that you would be into psychedelics just based on your appearance. And I think for me, that's like been a huge growing point, is like that. I think that psychedelics appeal to lots of people for lots of different reasons.
Oh, that's incredible. I love it. The 92-year-old. And yeah, you know, it's been interesting to watch this change, and thankfully there's more and more conversations, and it's becoming part of, hopefully integrated into the psychedelic space. Like to me, it's just kind of a necessary. But, you know, we'll see what happens, right? So let's talk about, you know, what you've been seeing in this space. You know, you're there in the Denver area, or you're in Colorado, and you've been part of this for a long time. I'm assuming, you said you were involved in the decriminalization movement, and then now it's been legal since Prop 122 passed in November. You know, I'm curious, as someone who lives there, has it changed the vibe already? And do you think this is all going in the right direction overall? Like, and do you have any concerns? I'm curious.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like Boulder especially has kind of always been a little psychedelic. So I don't know that I can say that it's like more psychedelic, but I think at least in the last year or so, people have been way more out about it. Like I go to the coffee shop to do some work and I hear people in the corner talking about psychedelics, which makes me really happy because I don't know that that would have happened in 2014, 2015 when I was first like getting into this world. But yeah, it's been like really interesting just kind of watching the growth of it. Like I was involved in the 2019 decriminalization campaign in Denver, and then the next year a group of us went out to Washington DC and worked on their campaign in the middle of COVID. And I really enjoy and appreciate like just talking to people on the street about psychedelics. I think there's lots of interesting conversations, and a lot of the time when you're like canvassing, trying to like get people to sign the petition, it's like, what angle do I go for to talk about psychedelics or decriminalization? Like talking to middle-aged women, I think would hit more on like the prison reform angle versus like talking to somebody who looks like they're in college, and maybe you would start with, hey, do you like psychedelics, as like my leading question to try to like spark conversation. So yeah, and it's been really interesting just kind of watching things unfold. And yeah, it's wild in terms of like the political action that went into actually passing a statewide initiative. Like it's not easy to pass a statewide initiative. It requires, I don't know how many thousands of people's effort. I don't know how many millions of dollars, but like it's not easy. And it's been kind of interesting watching the divide in Colorado, at least, between people who are for like, and then we maybe are a little bit past this, but originally when like the prop was first coming up, there's people who were for it, and then there's people who were against it because they're like worried about the corporate-delic, like big money psychedelic interest coming in. And I think we're still watching that play out in Denver, at least in Colorado, at least. Like, we passed Prop 122, but then it's been going through committees. They've been adding amendments. They've been trying to add like legal limits. So it's really interesting watching maybe like people vote for something and then watching the democratic process like take steps back has been really disheartening for me, where like the people voted on one thing and then it really seems to be veering more towards like corporate interests and less away from maybe like community healing, which is disappointing for me to watch happen in real time.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here silent because this is my biggest concern, and I'm not even located there. But it's it's going to affect the whole country and potentially the whole world, because Colorado is one of the leaders in this new legalization. But yeah, let's get into that a little bit too. And I won't grill you on what's happening in Colorado because I know it changes every day and there's so much going on. But I'm curious. You and the people you work with and the people you're connected to in the community there, is there a concern about that corporate-delic interest? Because before the interview, I mentioned the word regulation, and it's like, well, yeah, things have to be regulated on some level. I don't know. Part of me dreams of a world with everything unregulated, but that's not reality, not with the way humans act. But, what are the concerns? And do you think there's a chance of us trying to get this right somehow? So it doesn't end up just like another big pharmaceutical company that takes over and now we can't even access it unless you have thousands of dollars to pay for a patented psilocybin strain that you can only buy with a prescription from someone that costs $2,000 to go to and, has a 2-year waiting list. Is this, because I hear this a lot, and you can probably tell in my voice, it concerns me a little bit too. Is this a concern with a lot of people out there, and are we all just overreacting?
Yeah, I think it's a concern. I don't know if we're overreacting. I think, I don't know. This is one of the reasons I'm such a big proponent of decriminalization. I think that decriminalization, at least the way that I think it works best, allows people to grow, gift, and gather psychedelics. So I can give you, my friend, a handful of mushrooms, and as long as we're not paying money, no laws have been broken. So I think that, at least for me, I'm a real big proponent of that kind of at a baseline. We have like this decriminalization where you can grow, you can gift it, and you can grab it from nature. Like, I don't know, kind of how it works with roses, right? You walk out, you pick some roses, you give them to your mom. Like, nobody's going to get arrested for that. But then I do think that there is a necessity for like some kind of legalization. I think that increasingly there's like this demand for therapeutic psychedelics or being able to take psychedelics in different kind of medical settings. And I think that that's really important. I think that I also believe in that. But I think that if like we have a mismatch where there's legal psychedelics, as in like corporations can sell you a script or you can pay a psychedelic therapist a lot of money to get ketamine, but you're not able to go just do that in community, then I think we have like a problem. And I think that that's kind of the tension that we see in Colorado right now, is the tension between community facilitated healing and like going through a clinic or something of that model. So I think that there's this real big tension, and we're still watching it play out in Colorado, watching it play out in Oregon. And I think that these are really important places to watch this happen because, like, I don't know, I think that it should always be okay for a group of friends to go camping and have a psychedelic experience, hopefully for their benefit. Like, I think that that should always be something that's allowed. I think that, I don't know, there's like so many things that are wrong if only people who have money can get psychedelics, or if you need insurance to pay for a $5,000 or $3,000 psychedelic treatment, then like we're gatekeeping in like a really awful monetary based way.
Yeah, and this is actually one of my concerns too, is around community healing, ceremonial practices, kind of ancient ways of gathering, and also working with medicines, kind of on some level how we choose. And some of my friends there that I've talked to, that's their concern, because that's actually the space that they've been holding for a long time, is in this kind of traditional. We could say indigenous, but it's not always indigenous, but it stems from, indigenous cultures that have been walking this kind of ceremonial path for, millennia. And there's a concern about how this regulation might affect that. But you've mentioned community a few times, and this has come up so much on other interviews, and it's actually, it's a big passion of mine as well. How do you feel about community as it's connected to the psychedelic space or the healing space in general? And do you think there's some level of community healing in community is one of the answers to maybe the accessibility issue, maybe to just actually having bigger results, more growth? What are your thoughts around community versus like just doing one-on-one or even solo work?
Yeah, so I've been involved in psychedelic community through the Psychedelic Club of Denver for a while, and not in terms of maybe doing community healing, but in terms of creating a space for people to come talk about these experiences, creating a space for education to occur. And I think that that's a really huge component, at least for me, of getting to connect with other people who are engaging with psychedelics maybe differently, or just have different viewpoints than I do. So I think that that's a huge part of my psychedelic experience, is the people that I have met and connected with as a result of our mutual passion about psychedelics. And I don't know, I think that in terms of community healing with psychedelics, I think that it does offer an interesting way to maybe make sure that people's financial needs are met, right? Group healing sessions, I think, can have their own pitfalls and their own downsides, but it is a way to make sure that a psychedelic therapist or a shaman or whatever is able to charge a fair price and still be able to survive out there. And I don't know, I'm a big proponent of people doing this work getting paid a living wage. I've even recently been trying to trend towards the terminology thriving wage. I think everyone doing work in psychedelics should be paid a thriving wage, not just a wage that survives, but something that lets us chase our dreams and go on vacation and pay for healthcare. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little more, actually, because I interviewed someone a few weeks ago, and we spoke a lot about this, and it's kind of been, it's generally an issue in our entire planet and every industry, it seems like, where there's just a lot of inequality. But in the psychedelic space, it's been very interesting to navigate so many viewpoints, meaning, someone just found out how much legal psychedelic therapy will be in Oregon, and a whole bunch of people are up in arms, but there's so many factors behind it, and there's so much to it. And there's also, rules and regulations. And then there's things like rent, and then there's time. And, even as a therapist or an integration coach, how do you find that balance to find a thriving wage, or a thriving income that really supports you, but also serve the needs of maybe all people? Because again, even like you mentioned, ketamine therapy, so far I haven't found it to be, I haven't found anybody cheap unless they're doing ketamine circles. Meaning, I don't know, the minimum I found was $1,400, but maybe I'm just looking in the wrong places. But, how do we serve people that might be in need, that can't afford it, and also be thriving? How have you found this balance, and how do you suggest others find that balance in their practice, in their work?
Oh man, I don't know that I have found that balance. I think that that's an ongoing thing for me and my work in this space. At least for how I got my jumpstart in psychedelics, a lot of it was volunteering for free. I don't want to think of how many hours, hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours, that I've volunteered maps over the years, like for free. And like, I don't know. So at least for how I approach accessibility while trying to still like meet that thriving, a lot of like our offerings at Altered States Integration are on a sliding scale. Like our integration circles, we run 2 or 3 a month, and those are anywhere from $0 to $19. Like, what can you pay? Like, I don't know. I don't want, at least with my work where I'm at right now, to have like money be a barrier, but I also don't know that I would say that I'm in like a thriving state. So maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I'm misguided, or maybe, I don't know. Like, I think that like there's lots of people doing work in this space. And I think, it seems like lots of people are grappling with this question. How do I transmute the value I'm providing individuals, community, into a way that like provides a thriving wage? And I think the easiest answer is to sell drugs, but like, at least for me, who's trying to like stay on the legal side of things, like that's not the answer. And I don't know. I think it's like a question that we're going to have to kind of figure out, because I don't know, like, sitting down, like these numbers that people throw out for like psychedelic therapy seems insane. But then I guess I want to challenge everyone to kind of price it out from there. Like, if your therapist who makes $150 an hour is doing an 8-hour session, like, that's $1,000 right there. That doesn't include any preparation. That doesn't include any integration. That doesn't include any cost of the medicine. That doesn't include any trainings. Like, I just spent $100,000 on a master's degree. So like, at some point in time, I'd like to pay that off. So I think that there's like lots of costs, visible and hidden, that go into providing these services. And I think that there has to be a better way than charging $1,400 for a ketamine session, which costs pennies on the dollar to actually like make ketamine the drug.
It's funny because I just had this discussion when people were up in arms over, psilocybin therapy. And I'm like, it's hours and hours and hours. And then there's, setting up the space and the preparation. If something, maybe doesn't go as planned. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had psychedelic journeys that I thought were going to be 3 hours and they turn into 6, it happens all the time. So there is a reality, and I agree. It's kind of this weird place where, everybody's in sticker shock, including me, who's like, oh, I totally believe everybody should thrive. And how do we make this affordable and accessible? And then, when we get into like underground facilitators, it's kind of been the same thing. I've actually surveyed people I have this free Facebook group, and I tried to survey people a few months ago saying, how much do you pay, for underground, whatever it is, work? And it runs from, $50 down in Peru, of course, to up to, a few $1,000s for a one-on-one. And I've seen people up to like $8,000 to $10,000 for, some kind of like fancy retreat in Costa Rica, along with coaching and integration. So I've seen everything at this point. And it's like, well, I mean, how do we know what's right or wrong? How do we make this affordable? Maybe create scales, or, like maybe serve some clients at that $10,000 range and then some at the $200 range. I don't know. But it's something interesting to talk about, and we'll see what happens. I'm hoping maybe with supply and demand, or maybe with decriminalization or legalization, maybe somehow it does bring prices down as the supply grows. I don't know. I'm actually...
Yeah. I think decriminalization does brings the supply up, but then I think, I don't know, like we get into these questions of like, how do you vet somebody to hold space for you? And like, there are people out there that have more experience holding space than others. Like, someone who's been working in the underground for 10 years should probably charge more than somebody who had their first mushroom trip last week. And they're like, oh yeah, now I'm going to hold space for you, which I feel like I see a lot, where somebody's like, I just did psychedelics for the first time last year, and now I'm a psychedelic whatever. And I'm like, okay, how many trips have you even had? Like, I don't know. I think that these are like really big questions, and I don't claim to have an answer to them. And I really hope it ends up okay. And I feel like the more time I spend in psychedelics, maybe the more pessimistic I become. Like, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
That's like me. I'm like really trying to stay positive, because I do see this like this larger vision that I have for the world. I really believe there's some goodness in all this. And it's so easy to get pessimistic because I know I've met people like this that are speaking on panels at big psychedelic conferences that just started microdosing 3 years ago, and that's the extent of their psychedelic work. Wait, and I'm trying to take this like, who's to say what's right or wrong? How do I know? Who's whatever. But it's an interesting world, but we'll see. I have some questions for you actually on a personal level about your work with equine therapy. I've only interviewed one other person on this podcast who is a former client of mine who also was doing kind of psychedelic integration, equine therapy work. It was a huge part of her own path. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? You did your thesis on this, yes? And then...
Yeah, and I've been doing it for the past 2 years or so.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious to learn a little bit more about it. How do you explain equine therapy to someone, maybe like me who's never done it, even though I know...
Yeah. So at least the kind of like approach that I use to equine therapy treats like the horse as a partner in therapy. So they're not there to make metaphors about, they're not there to maybe have like as a tool, but they really are there as a third body in therapy, which I think is really can change the game. I guess let me start by telling a couple facts about horses that I think lend them to be good therapy partners. So horses are prey animals, which means they're really highly sensitive. So, something that I've discovered with horses and working with them is that I think that they know more about my mental, physical state than it appears. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if like the horses are sensitive enough to know what my heart rate is. And, they really love congruence, I think. So congruence is where our inner world and our outer world match up. So, it seems like that's when the magic happens to me, is when my client's able to maybe name what's going on inside, and then like suddenly the horse is open for connection. The horse is available. One time with a client, we were talking about how she needed grounding, and the horse came running over out of nowhere and like throws itself on the ground and starts rolling in the dirt. And she had like this aha moment where she's like, oh, okay, so that's how simple grounding can be. But yeah, so I think that they're really like highly sensitive beings. They are relational beings. Like by being in a herd, they have to rely on each other to survive. So I think that they really are tuned in. And then they also have a giant heart. Their heart's like 10 times bigger than ours, which means just in terms of like a nervous system co-regulation, when we spend time with horses, I think it's just really regulating for our nervous system. And I think lots of our clients, at least in my experience, come in talking about having experience with horses when they're younger. A lot of clients just like walking onto our ranch where we work, just the smell of the ranch feels like reminiscent of childhood. I guess the last thing that makes horses really great therapy partners is that they don't really have a frontal lobe. So they have one. It's much, much smaller than us, but the frontal lobe's responsible for planning and future focused thinking. So a lot of the time when we're sharing space with horses, we're really in the present moment. They kind of force us to be in the present moment because that's how they exist all the time.
Whoa. That's totally me. I rode horses like at camp as a kid, but that smell alone just, makes me like melt. It's like super safe feeling, probably because it was an escape from my actual home as a kid. But I'm curious, to learn more about logistically, how do you do this? Is it that people come to you specifically for equine therapy, or you work with already existing clients? And then you mentioned a ranch. Like, how does this happen?
Yeah, so at least for me, I've been working with a nonprofit out of Boulder for the last 2 years, and they do therapy groups as well as like individual therapy. So I facilitated, probably 15-ish therapy groups. We had like a ton of different populations. Like we worked with veterans, I worked with women with breast cancer, I worked with queer teens, I worked with Latino youth. Just to name a few, in addition to like my individual clients. So at least for like my work, a lot of my clients were coming to me because they were interested in the relational aspect because maybe they had experience with horses or maybe they were just kind of drawn to trying something different. Some of my clients would come in because they had tried all different kinds of therapy and nothing worked, and their daughter loved animals. So then she was out at our ranch and we were doing therapy. And yeah, I think it's I'd call it like experiential therapy. So I think that at least for me on my journey to be a psychedelic therapist, this has been like great training. Like I'm working with my clients and we're having an experience and then we're processing that experience. So it's not just like talk-based therapy. I think talk therapy a lot of the time can struggle to get to the root of trauma. Like trauma lives in our bodies. When we experience trauma, we lose the ability to talk. So talking about trauma isn't always the most effective way, but like having like a safe relationship to explore trauma, I think a lot of the time has been like huge. Watching my clients kind of have these aha moments or just being able to be safe in connection has been like,
oh my God, I want to do this. That sounds incredible. I'm curious, if people maybe turn to this because maybe they've been doing talk therapy a long time and nothing's really changing. And I personally agree. Like I believe in somatic, body-centered therapies that have at least been, for me, my biggest healing along with the medicine work, as the integration. Like to me, you don't really get the good results, results in quotes from the psychedelics without doing some form of like a somatic or experiential therapy. But, is this like this equine therapy? Would you say it's pretty, I hate using these words, but like effective, like have you seen these kind of, wow, people have big breakthroughs or they were able to access a certain place that they haven't gone to? Like, I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's been highly effective, but I think it's hard for me to know for sure how effective it is because I don't like have this comparison point of like seeing the exact same client in like a traditional talk-based therapy office. But for a lot of my clients, it's been really transformative and just kind of like offered them a way to heal. I think a lot of us have like relational attachment wounds, and being able to be in a relationship that feels safe is huge. And it's really, I don't know, cool or interesting watching like some of my younger clients. My youngest clients were a pair of 6-year-old siblings. And like, I don't know that like they weren't capable, like their brain wasn't developed in a way that would have lended it to like talking about their story. So like really just offering them this experience, I think has been huge. And then like after working with them for 6-7 months, like to finally have like built this relationship with us and the horses to a place where they're like ready to like ride the horses is like so cool to me that like they were able to like have this experience with a horse that they've like been lurking on building a relationship with for months, and like just watching this little 6-year-old on top of a giant Clydesdale horse, like my heart melts.
God, wow. Now I'm coming to Boulder for a couple days. Maybe I should have made it a longer trip because it's funny. I've been wanting to try this. And I live near places where there's horses, but I don't know if anyone's an actual therapist doing it. There was someone doing mindfulness based work. I think meditating with the horses, that kind of thing. But maybe we'll see. I love this. So, Tobey, I want you to have an opportunity to tell the audience, about what you have upcoming, what your plan is for the work and I mean, you're involved in so much, the work you have coming up maybe in the next year.
Great. So really excited about that. And let's see, what else do we have upcoming? So we're about to launch, I talked about this a little bit earlier. We call it our start to finish psychedelic integration circle workshop. So this is like an 8-week group coaching course that we put together that really teaches people how to do our approach to integration. So I guess I want to call it like a Wizard of Oz moment. We peel back the curtain and show you how we do our things. So we offer our students white papers and everything that we use to run our stuff. And then over 8 weeks, it's kind of designed to move you towards being ready to do this work. And then it kind of culminates with a co-leading opportunity. So we let our students co-lead one of our integration circles live and then get feedback afterwards is kind of like the wrap up. So yeah, I don't know when this is going to come out, but we run that 2 to 3 times a year.
Great. And then what about you? Are you open to new clients? Do you do online? Or are you only in person out in Colorado?
Yeah, so I'm really in a state of transition right now. So I've been working at the equine therapy place for the past 2 years, and then am kind of moving off onto my own as a therapist, which is exciting. So kind of trying to figure that out. Like I was working on that right before I got on this call, actually, but like putting together the pieces to do private practice is something that I'm working on right now. And then I personally would love to move more towards figuring out the pieces to do psychedelic therapy. And I feel like it's kind of something that's going to come with time. Like Colorado's still figuring out their stuff. Like they don't quite know how it's going to look for people to be doing legal psychedelic therapy.
Isn't that funny? I had someone call me up a few months ago saying, should I just move to Colorado? I'm like, they just voted it like a month ago. Like things don't move that fast, unfortunately.
Yeah, like we're just watching Oregon starting. Like, what is that, 3 years later? Yeah, so I don't know. I think, at least for me, I'm going to try to be the best psychotherapist possible. I think that, like, that's something a lot of people forget, is that psychedelic therapy is still therapy. And, like, if you're approaching from that viewpoint, you really should, I don't know, hone your therapy skills as much as possible. So that's something that I'm going to be working on. And then I think just continuing to host like our psychedelic integration circles. We run a themed circle every month on a different topic. Like last month we talked about psychedelic ego death. This month we're talking about recreational psychedelics. In June we're going to be talking about integrating the queer psychedelic experience. So we run one of those a month, as well as a couple just more general purpose psychedelic integration circles.
I'm sad that I missed the ego death one. And that's like one of my favorite subjects.
Yeah, and I mean, it's wild just like talking to people about ego death, listening to different people's experiences. And I don't know, it's always interesting when we host these theme circles, because I'd say 2/3 of the people are really passionate about the topic, and then 1/3 are curious. So which always creates good discourse where people are like, how do I know that I'm having a psychedelic ego death? And like and then I feel like we usually or sometimes will spin off into tangential stuff. It feels to me like psychedelics are related to philosophy and consciousness and spirituality and Buddhism. So I feel like all these like topics that I'm like tangentially related to somehow always get pulled in, or often get pulled into this discussion about psychedelics. We're suddenly talking about parts-based work in integration circle. I'm like, oh man, you guys are the coolest.
So fun. Oh, these sound like great integration circles. And when you guys are ready to launch the 8-week training, let me know. I'll share it with my clients, my community. Just because, over the years, of course, my clients are like, I'm starting an integration circle. And it's nice to know that there's other models and there's other ways. And, how do you stand out and just not have the generic integration circle, but make it the integration circle that people want to go to? And really like the community that aligns with who you are as a practitioner or a coach or a healer.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the biggest tip I can give anyone who's passionate about doing this kind of work is to just show up and start trying to do the thing. I think that that's the biggest lesson I've learned. Like building a psychedelic community is we met for a while every Monday night for years. And starting off, there'd maybe be 5 people in the room. And then over time, like it grows. But I think like even now I have to like tell myself these things take time. Like it takes time to build a community. And at its heart, I think that that's what Altered States Integration is. It's the community for people who are passionate about psychedelic integration, who are passionate about psychedelic education and harm reduction. So like, I think if you build it, they will come is like the truest thing that I've ever heard. But I think there should be like an addendum. If you build it, they will come slowly.
Exactly. Well, Tobey, it was so great to meet you. We'll also share your event at Psychedelic Science. I plan to be there. I hope I didn't make other plans that night, but I doubt it because I only have one other thing I'm going to. But this is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And most of all, thank you so much for this important work you're doing in the world. I can't wait to meet you out in Colorado. I'm sure we'll meet somehow, at your event, maybe. Hopefully we'll get time to connect. And thank you so much. And we'll have all your links right here in the show notes so everybody can be in touch with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Beth. This has been such a fun chat.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're feeling inspired, I'd appreciate it if you showed your love with a review. And check out my YouTube channel where you can find the video version of this podcast. You can also head to bethaweinstein.com to learn more about me and grab my free business growth trainings. Remember, you carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times.